Welcome. In this lecture, we're going to go through X-intercepts and Y-intercepts. This is one of these things to watch a little bit carefully because students will tend to swap them. So I'll try to also be careful in how I color code things so that hopefully it'll help a little bit to imprint it in your mind. So let's go through. So what is a Y-intercept? So a Y-intercept. So a Y-intercept is going to be where, and I'm going to do also my color coding a little bit different than normal to actually help with this. So it's where we have that the graph, so my graph is now red, so where the graph is going to intersect the y-axis, so this is where it intersects the y-axis, it intersects the y-axis. So these are purposely both green. And so how do we find this? So that's the other important part, is that you're going to find this by subbing in. So by subbing. And what you're going to want to sub in is x equals 0. So x equals 0. You're going to want to sub in x equals 0. Get going a little fast and then things are going to disappear into f of x. So I'm going to show you this. Okay. Maybe we'll even make that orange to indicate that that's where it's getting subbed in. So here we go. So let's look at an example. And we're going to start with, so we have our x-axis. Oh, sorry. What we're doing an example of, that's usually good to start with. So we want to look for the y-intercept. Okay, and it's going to be for f of x equals x squared plus 2x minus 2. So I have my x-axis. And I have my y-axis. This is my y-axis. This is my x-axis. And in fact, actually, I want to make my y-axis go down a little bit further. So use the balancing act so that I don't make it go down so far that I don't have any room below, but it goes down far enough. And I've got, so the graph of this function, I've looked at a graphing calculator, or you can actually just Google, graph of, and then put in that function, and it will just show you. So here we go. So this is the graph. So this is y equals, so it's right there. So it's x squared plus, let's make that more pronounced, 2x minus 2. Okay. So now what we need to do, so we do indeed need to sub in. So we're going to sub, so I'm going to sub x equals 0. And I'm going to sub it into this function. So I'm going to sub it into my function here. So I have f of x equals, right? And then I have, well, okay, so it's x squared plus 2x minus 2. Okay, but I know that what I'm really putting, so this x is this x and this x. And I do my typical thing of using parentheses first. So we'll do that. Where I first write this, where every time I see x, I put parentheses. So and then square that, and then plus 2 times x minus 2. And then I do put this x equals 0 into each of them. And what I'm going to get out is going to be this minus 2. So this is going to equal minus 2. Okay, and then that's actually going to be on here. So this level is minus 2. The point, right, you might be interested in what exactly is this point. And that's a good thing to have in mind is both what level this is at, like what is my y value and what is the point altogether. So I'm going to give you both of those. So I'm going to put my minus 2 over here to give me a little room for that. So this point is actually, well, its x coordinate is 0, and its y coordinate is minus 2. Okay, so the answer, right, and this minus 2 came from here. So this minus 2 is going to go, that's precisely, right, that level there. Okay, so my y-intercept is equal to minus 2. So my y-intercept, so I'm going to write it as equal to minus 2. Some people might write it as the point 0 minus 2. So it's good to know that both of those are answers that some people may give. Okay? But it's just where your graph is going to intersect the y-axis. So you have to keep that in mind. Try to keep these pictures in mind and so on. Why does this end up confusing? Because you're subbing in x equals 0. But, right, if I want to intersect the y-axis, then my x is equal to 0. That's how I live on the y-axis. Okay. So now let's look at x-intercepts. And this is not a mistake that when I'm talking about x-intercepts, that I actually have a s there. Because often there's more than one of these. Unlike your y-intercept, you're only going to have once, as long as your function is a function, right? Just by the vertical line test, right? You can't cross this axis twice and still be a function. Okay. So this is where the graph intersects. So where the graph is going to intersect So this is where it's going to intersect the x-axis, right, which is why it's orange. The x-axis is usually orange. To remember that, okay, and it's good to remember the pictures to help keep these straight also. Okay, so how do we find it? We find by setting, right, that we have that f of x is equal to 0. So we're looking for where that equals 0. Okay, so instead of sticking 0 in, now we're setting it equal to 0. Okay, and then solving for x. So, and solving for our x value. Okay. So here we go. Example. Okay, so the x-intercepts, we're looking for the x-intercepts. Okay, and we are using a slightly different function. Okay, so these are 4. Then we have f of x equals x squared minus 2x minus 3. Okay. And we have our orange axis. So here's our x-axis. Okay. And our y-axis. So this is going to be our y-axis. And then our graph is going to be okay, so this is going to be y equals f of x equals x squared minus 2x minus 3. Okay, and then, so we need to solve for, so what do we need to do now? So we need to solve for x. So we're going to solve for x, where we're going to have with and then we have f of x equals 0. So f of x equals 0 by factoring. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So if I have the function, so I have x squared minus 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. I'm kind of keeping that consistent in color just to emphasize what we're doing or to help you organize your brain. So this is x plus 1 times x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, so the zeros, so the x-intercepts are, so my x-intercepts are going to be, right, the zeros, and so when we factor, we can tell that the zeros, right, we do the opposite sign of those. So minus 1 and 3 are x equals, so we have minus 1 and 3. Okay, so now let's look at those here. So this would be my minus 1. So I could tell that I had one of each sign just by looking at the graph even. And then if we want to know what those points are, right? So this point here would be, well, its x value is minus 1. And then its y value is 0. This is going to be true, right, for all the intercepts here. As opposed to that one where the first coordinate had to be 0, this one we knew the second coordinate had to be 0 because of what we were solving for. So that shouldn't surprise us. Okay, and here this one, the point is actually 3 and then 0 again. Okay, so what do we have going on here is that we have, well, and maybe also because I put these there, I'll do the same thing here where I'll kind of emphasize that these were showing me, well, you can see the other ones over there. These are showing me, so in the case of a y-intercept, this is where I intersect the y-axis. What is the y-axis? It's all points where x equals 0. So I need to set x equals 0 and then see what I get out. The x-intercepts are where I intersect the x-axis. And what is the x-axis? It's where y equals 0. So I have to set the function equal to 0. Sometimes you'll have to factor. Maybe you'll use a quadratic formula or something like that. Okay, so hope that made some sense, and I will see you in the next lecture. Sure.